This is going to be Chapter 20, Part 2, Development and Inheritance. This section we're going to talk about labor and delivery, stages of labor, premature labor, multiple births, and then obstetrical terminology as a clinical note. Labor and delivery. The goal of labor is parturition. Parturition is the forcible expulsion of the fetus from the uterus. Quite a bit of terms in this chapter, in this section. Stages of labor. Dilation stage. Begins with the onset of labor as the cervix dilates and the fetus begins to slide down the cervical canal. And this can take about 8 after. This is a pretty variable stage. Can take up to 24 even. Expulsion stage. Begins when the cervix is pushed open by the fetus and it dilates completely, which is about 10 centimeters. And the expulsion stage ends whenever the baby is birthed or delivery happens. Placenta stage, this is the afterbirth or the placenta's delivery. Once this is delivered, then the stages of labor are over. This is a positive feedback system. The interaction between the myometrium and the hormones essentially add fuel to this fire. And until the baby is actually delivered, the positive feedback system will not disengage. Other ways that we can bring about this positive feedback system are with suckling, and we'll talk about that with postpartum bleeding. So this is figure 2013 in your book. Stage 1 is the dilation stage, which we're talking about the cervix and the cervical opening. And at the point that it gets to 10 centimeters, this stage ends and stage 2 begins, which is the expulsion stage. This is actual live birth. This stage actually ends with the delivery of the child. And then the placental stage, which is the placenta actually detaching itself from the uterine lining here. It should always be inspected. There should be a rough spot on the placenta. We should check it so it doesn't look like it's torn up, or there might be missing pieces of the placenta still attached to the uterine wall. This causes vaginal bleeding. The vaginal bleeding can cause the mother to become hypotensive and go into shock. So very simply, inspect the placenta at the point that it delivers. As soon as the child delivers, to excite this even more, if the child suckles, the suckling will cause a release of pitocin to the uterus. This will cause contractions to continue, and if there's possibly any sections of the placenta still stuck to the uterine wall, that those will come off and be expelled out as well. So you can also massage the fundus, this area here, from the outside to make it shrink. Premature labor. Premature labor occurs when the labor contraction begins before the fetus has complete normal development. Dividing line between spontaneous abortion and an immature delivery is about 500 grams. So under 500 grams, it can be deemed very easily spontaneous abortion. If it's over 500 grams, an immature delivery. Premature delivery usually refers to births of infants at about 28 to 36 weeks. Prior to this, they probably aren't viable. 26 weeks is about the limit on this, and that's due to the development of surfactant in the lungs. Anything beyond or before the 28-week mark, their lungs probably aren't developed. There's no surfactant. The development of synthetic surfactants and pig surfactant that is applied into the lung tissue of the newborn has increased this dramatically. Multiple births. Dizygotic. 2 eggs are fertilized at the same time with 2 separate zygotes. So both of them are fertilized in there. They're twins, but they may not be identical twins. Monozygotic. Twins results from the separation of the blastomeres early in the cleavage or from the splitting of the inner mass before gastrulation. Now, this would be identical twins, monozygotic. Conjoined twins is another possibility of this. Twins share a portion of the skin or liver. I think anybody that's looked around on the internet has probably seen conjoined twins. More extensive fusions cause a failure to survive delivery. Clinical note, and these are obstetrical terminology. So we're going to run over these really quick. Please look these over in your book. First one we're going to look at is antepartum, the time interval prior to the delivery of the fetus. So prior to the delivery of the fetus is antepartum. Postpartum, after the delivery of the fetus. So after kiddo is delivered, this is considered postpartum. Prenatal, synonymous with antepartum. Prenatal and antepartum, like your prenatal visits and things like this. Natal, relative to birth. Gravity, number of times a woman has been pregnant, and generally this is expressed. A good last menstrual period is always going to be, in case they haven't had prenatal visits, G, P, and then A is a good way to actually do that, and we'll talk about these here in just a second. But the G stands for how many times a woman has been pregnant, gravida. Primigravida, woman who is pregnant for the first time. Primipara, woman who has given birth to her first child. Multigravida, woman who has been pregnant more than once. Nulligravida, woman who has not been pregnant. Multipara, woman who has delivered more than one baby. Nullipara, woman who has not yet delivered her first child. Grand multiparity, woman who has delivered at least 7 babies. Gestation, period of time for intrauterine fetal development. So 40-week gestation could be used. This means normal time period for pregnancy. So as far as this GPA, para means how many children are living, and then A stands for abortion, whether spontaneous or elective. So if a woman has been pregnant 5 times, a G5, she has 2 living children, including this pregnancy, and then we have had 3 spontaneous abortions. That's how that would be represented. Last menstrual period is an easy way to figure their EDC date, which is estimated date of confinement. EDC is whenever the child should be born. Postnatal development, the neonatal period, infancy, childhood. Clinical note over postnatal development, adolescence and maturity, and then abortion in the clinical note as well. Life stages, we have neonate, infancy, childhood, adolescence, and then maturity, and we'll talk about the definitions on those. Neonatal period, infancy and childhood, and then we're going to talk about those, the neonatal and infancy and childhood. So neonatal period. At birth, the lungs are collapsed, and they require pretty much a powerful inhalation. During the first ventilations, you may have to hit the pop-off valve 1 time to inflate the lungs. After that, it should be easy. You should not have to continuously hit the pop-off valve on a neonatal PPM. When the lungs expand, the cardiovascular system changes. Separation of the pulmonary and systemic circuits. So first time the lung expands, it goes from a high pressure system on the right side or the venous side to a low pressure system. General heart rate should be 120 to 140 with a respiration of about 30 breaths per minute. Digestive system remains inactive before birth, collecting debris that's in the amniotic fluid. This will be expelled the first few days of life. Waste products in the arterial blood. Glomerular filtration rate is normal, but the neonate can't concentrate their urine yet, so urine water loss is higher than adults. Little ability to control their body temperature. As the infant grows, large sub-Q fat layers get thicker. Metabolic rates also rise. Daily and hourly shifts in body temperature continue through childhood. So whenever children are born, they're pretty much synonymous with their environment. If the environment's cold, they're going to turn colors. They're going to look like a Smurf or turn blue. Keep them warm is the point on this. Easy way to do that after delivery is to place the mom so that the child can suckle on top of mom's chest and kind of apply a barrier there. One of those space blankets or something over the child so that there's a layer so that mom's body heat can generate warmth for the newborn baby. Clinical note, postnatal development. Neonatal extends from birth to 1 month. So These are a little bit different if anybody's had PALS. At this point, PALS looks at these a little differently, and these will be adjusted in your paramedic curriculum as well. But as far as the book's concerned, neonate extends from birth to 1 month. Neonates lose about 10% of their body fat, adjusting to extrauterine life or after they're born. Usually gain it back at the 10-day mark, double in body weight by 5 to 6 months. Infancy, 1 month to 2 years. So if you're an infant, if you are 14 months old, then you're still an infant. Now this is an alteration or a change from the way PALS sees it, so just be aware of that. Childhood, 2 years to puberty, or the onset of pubescent hormones. And the table is 20.5 in your book, 20-4 in your book on page 755. Lactation, the mammary glands. Colostrum is one of the things that we get from mother's milk, secreted by the mother in the first 2 to 3 days, which applies more protein and less milk fat. And then we need to talk about the milk letdown reflex, secreted when the infant begins to suck on the nipple. And this is a picture of that. So we start off at 1 here. Receptors in the nipples are stimulated by the infant suckling, which applies sensation, impulses propagated to the spinal cord. Stimulation of the hypothalamic nuclei, posterior pituitary, and oxytocin is released. Now, this area here is what we were talking about during birth or right after birth. So what this would do is this would increase contractions in the uterine wall. This would also, if there was any leftover sections of the placenta still stuck to the uterine wall, assist that to be ejected out or delivered as well. And then 5 on this is going to be the milk is ejected. Adolescence and maturity, 3 hormonal events interact with the onset of puberty. The hypothalamus increases gonadotropic releasing hormone. Anterior pituitary becomes sensitive to the presence of gonadotropic releasing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Ovarian and testicular cells become more sensitive to FSH and LH. These changes initiate gamete formation or the production of either the ovum or the spermatocyte or spermatid. Sudden acceleration in the growth rate, which ends at the closure of the epiphyseal plates. Now this is going to happen 18 to 21 time frame, depending on the child's development. Clinical note on abortion. Expulsion of the fetus prior to the 20-week gestation. Abortion and miscarriages can be used interchangeably in medical terminology, spontaneous abortion or miscarriage. Spontaneous abortions occur naturally occurring abortions, commonly seen in the 12th to 14th week. 10 to 20% of all pregnancies end in spontaneous abortion. Genetics and development. Genes and chromosomes, clinical note over inherited disorders, emergency implications, the Human Genome Project, chromosomal abnormalities and genetic analysis, and then trauma during pregnancy. Genetics and development and inheritance. Genotype. Chromosomes and their components present on your genotype. Now this is human, dog, cat, things like that. Phenotype, a collection of anatomical and physiological characteristics that make you an individual or makes up your phenotype. Example is blonde hair, brown hair, black hair. These are what are in your phenotype. Genes and chromosomes. In humans, every somatic cell contains 46 chromosomes, and they're arranged in 23 pairs. We have homologous chromosomes, 2 members of each pair of chromosomes, and autosomal chromosomes, 22 pair known as autosomal. As homologous chromosomes are chromosomes that are paired during meiosis. They contain 4 chromatids. 1 pair come from the father and the other from the mother. Homologous chromosomes are the same size, their centromeres are in the same position, and they have the same number of genes arranged in the same order. So homologous chromosome, 2 members of each pair of home chromosomes, so 1 from mom, 1 from dad. Autosomal, also 1 from father and 1 from mother, but they don't include the sex hormone. So this is, instead of the 23 pair that we're seeing up here, only 22 pair of those. one pair is for sex chromosomes. And these are a picture. This is figure 2017 in your book. These are the 6 chromosomes here, X and Y. Autosomal chromosomes, alleles. 2 pair chromosomes may not carry the same form of each gene. The variation forms are called alleles. Homozygous. Homozygous refers to having identical alleles for a single trait. Example of this, a dominant gene or a recessive gene. So if we say homozygous, they have the same pairing. So this would be like brown eyes, and both of these would be dominant because they're big letters, versus blue eyes, and these are both recessive. They're small letters, or how they're done on a Punnett square, or Punnett square. Heterozygous, having 2 different alleles of the same gene, and this would be one, you have one dominant, one recessive, and we'll look at these squares here in just a couple slides. A dominant, this will be expressed regardless of any conflicting instructions carried by the other allele. So if you have a dominant and a recessive, the dominant is always going to be expressed. Recessive will be expressed in the phenotype if it is present on both chromosomes of a homologous pair. So if we are blue eye recessive, this will be expressed. And it depends on what the other parent has to say about it. Now we'll take a look at these here in a second. Autosomal chromosomes contaminants. Predicting inheritance. Simple inheritance phenotypes are determined by interactions between a single pair of alleles, and this would be, you get one from mom, one from dad. Polygenic inheritance. Multiple alleles involve the presence or the absence of phenotypic traits cannot easily be predicted using a simple Punnett square. Polygenic inheritance is when a single trait is controlled by 2 or more sets of alleles. Most human traits are polygenic inherited. Examples would be skin, eye color, things like that. So this is why 2 parents can get together and the child has a different set of, a completely different color of eyes than the parents do. They were polygenic inherited. Multiple things come into play. This is a simple Punnett square. Now, not all polygenic things can be predicted by this. Maternal alleles. The parents are on the outside of this, and the kiddo's possibilities are on the inside of this. So let's kind of do these here really quick. Okay, so in this case, we have 2 recessive genes, and this is for albinoism in your book. This is figure 2018. And in this one here, we have 2 dominant genes. So how this is going to work is just simply AA, 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 AA. Mom, in this case, we have a recessive, dominant, recessive. So very simply, half of the offspring might actually have albinoism. And the red ones up here were for the albino trait, but they were both recessive. And this one here, to where you have a recessive gene as well, and another recessive, the recessive is going to express itself. So half of the children in the second Punnett could be albino. Whenever you have multiples here, it's set up the same way. So XC, XC, this is for color blindness. XC, Y, XC, 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 Y. Clinical note, inherited disorders, emergency implications, and these are some of the things that we can actually inherit. Genetical malformations. Marfan syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. Generally in Marfan's, pretty sure that Abraham Lincoln had Marfan syndrome. Arms are longer than they are tall. So if you see somebody that's their arms are dragging down around their knees, they may have something called Marfan's. In Marfan's individuals, what we see is we see the stretching of their aorta, which precipitates them for having things like a AAA. Huntington's disease, progressive dementia at about 35 to 40 years old, sickle cell disease, abnormal hemoglobin or S hemoglobin, cystic fibrosis, excessive thick mucus development, and we're talking every mucous membrane. Most normally this affects their respiratory system. Muscular dystrophy, abnormal intracellular metabolism of the muscle fibers. Sex chromosomes. Sex chromosomes determine an individual's biological sex. You have X chromosomes, which are larger and have more genes to them, and you have Y chromosomes, which include dominant alleles. Female is going to be XX and the male is going to be XY as far as sex determination. We do have things called X-link as well. An X-link chromosomes. The X chromosome also carries genes that affect somatic structures. Genetic disorders are due to mutations in genes on the X chromosomes called X-linked. Now, what these give us is these give us things like Huntington's and Marfan's and things like this. Human Genome Project. Human Genome Project, the goal was to describe the human genome. A genome is a full set of DNA or genetic material, and term karyotyping, isolation and identification of an individual's complete set of chromosomes. Clinical note, chromosomal abnormalities and genetic analysis. Now there's a bunch of these, please look over them. Translocation, defects where a piece of chromosome 8 attaches to chromosome 14. So this is called Burkitt's lymphoma. Trisomy, something wrong in meiosis. One gamete involved in fertilization carries an extra copy of one chromosome. Trisomy 21, Down syndrome, an extra 21st chromosome. Abnormal sex chromosomes. Abnormal number of sex chromosomes, XXY phenotype, is male, but the testes fail to mature. Turner syndrome, have only a single female sex chromosome, XO. Maturation does not appear at puberty. Fragile X syndrome, mental retardation, abnormal facial development, enlarged testes in affected individuals. And then a term called amniocentesis, which is a sampling of the amniotic fluid. Removed fetal cells it contains is analyzed and permits 20 congenital conditions is what it looks for. Now these are the pages in your book if you want to take a look at them. This is figure 2019 in your book, and these are congenital malformations, and all of these can be tracked through amniocentesis. Clinical note, trauma during pregnancy, physiologial changes, and then abrupto placenta, and we're going to take a look at the figures and kind of talk about this. So figure 2020, the biggest change is to the reproductive system. In the non-pregnant state, uterus is kind of small, about 60 grams or about 10 cc's is what it will hold. By the end of pregnancy, 1,000 grams, and then it can hold 5,000 mils. So as we can see on this, it has to have some place to go. It displaces the rest of the organs as it increases in size. This is going to displace the diaphragm, make shortness of breath occur, displace the abdominal organs up against it, make the individual waddle from expansion and then softening of the pelvic cavity. Uterus contains about 1/6 or 16% of the mother's total blood volume. Other changes occur in the reproductive system, include the formation of a mucus plug, protects the cervical opening for the developing fetus and protects it from infection. The plug will be expelled when the cervical dilations in the first stage of labor generally. Estrogen causes the vaginal mucosa to thicken. Vaginal secretions increase connective tissue to loosen and allow for delivery. The breasts enlarge and become more nodular as mammary glands increase their number of size in preparation for lactation. Respiratory system, 20% increase in oxygen consumption and a 40% increase in tidal volume. Cardiovascular system, cardiac output increases, blood volume increases by about 45%. The anemia that's caused in pregnant individuals is from hemodilution. When the blood volume increased, we didn't exactly increase the amount of formed elements in it. So the 45% increase in volume actually thinned out the blood. So they generally give them prenatal vitamins and iron to combat this. Another thing with this, you can suffer about a 30 to 35% blood loss without any kind of significant changes in vital signs. So the pregnant females are going to act just like pediatrics are. They're going to go all the way up to the edge of the cliff until they give us a sign and symptom, and then they're going to crash. Gastrointestinal, nausea, vomiting, bloating, constipation, the abdominal organs are displaced, they essentially have a physiological GERD. Gastrointestinal reflux. Urinary system, renal blood flow increases, and glomerular filtration rate increases by about 50%. This is what's going to make them urinate or pee more. In trauma, whenever we see trauma, this is attached to the uterine wall by chorionic villi. So if a coup contre coup took place, or we were headed this way and then all of a sudden had trauma on it, it could pluck this away from the uterine wall. This gives us something sometimes called an abrupto placentae, which will cause bleeding from this area. Now, depending on whether or not this has a track out, this may not spot, or we may get spotting from this. The thing that the female patient is going to express to us is a tearing sensation has occurred. Postural hypotension. Now, from the developing fetus, because it's increasing in size, it can actually put pressure on the vena cava. This would decrease the amount of preload returning back to the heart. So if we have them lying on their back, we should always put them on a position called the left lateral recumbent. The aorta has more muscular structures in it, or tunica media, and can take the pressure exerted on it. The vena cava cannot, it's under low pressure. General terms you should know: abrupto placenta, which would be a tearing of the placenta off the uterine wall. Amniocentesis checks for genetical malformations. Chorionic villi is what attaches the placenta to the uterine wall. Congenital malformation, things that we see in the development of the fetus. Ectopic pregnancy, the ovum fertilized whenever the blastocele started developing, actually adhered to the wall in the fallopian tube. Geriatrics, this is geriatric individual, specialized type of medicine that is developed for older individuals. Infertility, inability, whether on the male's part or the female part. In vitro fertilization would be the implanting of eggs. Pediatrics, specialized study in pediatric medicine. Placenta previa. We didn't talk about this, but let's really quick. Uterine development, the placenta, whenever it falls from the fallopian tube, instead of adhering here, it does free fall a little bit more and adheres here. So as it develops, if kiddo is here and contractions occur, there is no way besides C-section that we're going to get kiddo out without killing both mom and kid. Tetragens, which are drugs have them in them. They'll cross across the placental membranes and cause birth defects to developing fetuses. And this ends part 2. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My name is Roy Smith, 405-219-7613, or smith@imsa.net. Thank you.